measuring your data maturity and building your roadmap. And it's presented by myself, Bill Rodriguez, and Ms. Jasmine. So for the agenda on today, we're going to first talk about what is data maturity. We'll dive into a high level, just touch the surface around what we do and how we do it to determine your digital maturity level. And then talk about a roadmap, what it looks like, and who specifically they can be used by. And then talk about how to sign up for digital maturity assessment. So as I mentioned previously, my name is Philip Rodriguez. I'm a managing consultant in the data and AI practice. I bring many years of content management experience to Catapult. I've actually been managing digital assets at an organizational and enterprise level since going back to 1995. So don't want to shed too much light on my age, but it's been quite a while. I'm very excited to be here. And Ms. Jasmine, if you want to introduce yourself.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Jasmine Britton, and I'm the Data and AI Practice Manager over at Catapult for the Data and AI practice. And I got 20 plus years experience in all things data and AI, data platform, engineering, analytics, and all across the spectrum, including data maturity, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to go ahead and start at talking about what is data maturity. And when it comes to building and driving a modern data culture in any organization, one of the key fundamental drivers we start out with is to measure modern data culture. And so how do we measure that? And when it comes to culture, like what was discussed in the previous session, it's a set of habits, beliefs, and behaviors, right? So what are those habits and behaviors that we want to use to be able to measure that moving forward? As Erwin had mentioned in the first keynote session this morning, he talked about setting up and building that data-driven organization, and it's a journey, right? Outlining what that journey looks like. But it's also, how do you know you're on that journey, right? Where do you start on that journey? And what is the progress to make, right, to be able to measure that journey? And so this data maturity is a way to do that, right? So it's a defined set of capabilities to measure progress in an organization. And it helps you to define where you're at today and where do you want to be based on several high-level data management capabilities. And there's a way to measure that, to grow your data program moving forward. And it's also a way to compare with the industry, best practices across many verticals in different types of businesses to be able to know whether, you're on the right track, and helps to grow that process. It's also very repeatable. So it's a way to build that enterprise level strategy and manage to that moving forward. So there's two major pillars here for data maturity. There's the capabilities and the maturity levels. So we're going to get into that now. And the data maturity categories, there's 5 high-level categories that we use to measure for data culture, right? And that's analytics strategy, ideation, analytics adoption, data management, and data platform architecture and operations. Now, what Sid had alluded to in our Modern Data Culture 101 session, he said there were several key important aspects of some of these categories which help build that data culture. Analytics strategy, analytics adoption, data management, which we talked about, data governance, which is part of that pillar as well. And so these are really key to the process and exercise to build that framework and the roadmap. And so this exercise is business led, right? So we've got, in an organization, who are the people that are involved with this exercise? You've got the sponsors, the business stakeholders, the key executives, all the individuals that are crucial in the organization to be able to define, what are the problems that we're trying to solve, right? What are those key priorities, and where do I want to be 6 months from now, a year from now? So these pillars, and on the right-hand side, you see they do intertwine, right? Because each capability builds upon the other, and they all integrate. Now, in terms of measuring that for the levels, right, there's a scoring mechanism. So, and I'm sure many of you have seen this before, where it starts with 1 through 5. And so we start out with a maturity level of 1, which is translates to unmanaged, right? So in terms like what, there are areas to improve, right, in these specific categories, and working towards up through 5, which is optimized and mature. And so, this is a great way to measure each specific data management category so that you can build that framework and roadmap. And then in the data maturity assessment exercise, right, we marry these two, right, because we use the data management categories and the maturity levels to pull together that exercise, and we call it that data maturity assessment. And so that assessment, we come together, it's a collaborative workshop and assessment exercise where we look at the organizational business objectives. What do you want to achieve? How do you want to get there, right? And it includes each organization and department even scoring themselves first, right? What is that starting point, right? And then we help you look at the priorities of the organization so that we can get to a plan 6 months, a year from now to build that roadmap. Next, we'll get into deep dive on a couple of examples for this. But next, we're going to talk about the why. Why is it important to go through the data maturity exercises? And Phil will walk through that for us.
Yeah, thanks, Jasmine. So the first thing I want to call your attention to is just the picture of the person standing there in front of a board with their hands on their head, and you can almost feel the frustration here, and so this is really what we want to talk about. So the pieces that I want to highlight as you're going through this digital evolution, this digital maturity, this modernization, we're going from a world where information and systems were typically held in information silos. Many of you are experiencing that today. You've got a number of different systems. Maybe you're a sales group that have multiple systems to handle the process, some legacy and some maybe off-the-shelf systems to be able to stitch together your picture of what your sales department is. Well, as you transition into the digital revolution, those point systems, those line of business systems, have now become information silos. And now we're in this world where we have to marry information silos, your legacy systems, with now this vision of I want to make data-driven decisions. And in order to do so, I need to take information from all over the enterprise and piece it together so that I can gain insights. So the top challenges that organizations face, and you can search everywhere, that pretty much everybody's going to lead you back to these 3 main pieces. And I know Sid in our previous presentation alluded to them. I talked about them a little bit. So we're going to get into a little bit more detail. First, resistance to change. This is a transformational technology. This is kind of like the next step in the internet. When I entered the workforce, when we went from mainframe systems to PCs, and that was a huge transformation and led to some great results in the internet, smartphones, and here we are today. But at the end of the day, resistance to change is the leading challenge that organizations face as they're making this transformation. Part 2 of that really is organizational data literacy. We have IT understands databases and the technology and interfaces and integration, but the business doesn't. The business just knows this is what I think a customer is, and these are the reports that I've always created, and this is what I want. And then the last piece here is this notion that data is an enterprise asset. Right? In order to achieve an enterprise view, trusted view, you have to transition or mature from this experience that it's owned by sales because it's sales information to now it's owned by the enterprise because everybody can access and use that information. So those are the key pieces. And over on the right, information sharing. So I'm going to run through this slide pretty quickly, but it's just going to build on what we talked about before. So in yesterday's world, a project to implement a new system for the sales team is just simply that. It's a project. It impacts them. You get a PM, you roll it out, you train a few people, and you're good to go. In today's world, you have to look at, if you want to gain enterprise insights, what this graphic represents. If you look at on the left, we have sales and customer service, and management, distribution, so on and so forth. Those are meant to represent some pretty typical, business units within an organization. And when we look at sales, we have sales pipeline and customer insights. So that line is representative of what they're getting through their line of business systems. If you want to expand that, now we get into the white sections, and this is true of everything that's listed down there. Now you're starting to look at pulling in bits and pieces of information from other line of businesses, other departments, other groups. And so you have to start breaking down those barriers, those information silos, to start to pull in and consume information. Now, the key challenge in there is it is a balancing act. If you look at my very simple diagram over on the right, these are common challenges, right? We have an ERP, we have an HRM, we have a CRM, we have other point solutions. Maybe it's something you built in the 90s. I mean, who knows? And then on the other side of that, we have information needs, and what are we trying to achieve there? We want enterprise value. We want business value. And in order to achieve that, because we're in silos and we're moving into this larger world of shared information, there are real issues that need to be addressed around security or regulatory needs. What are my compliance needs? What type of PII or HIPAA information do we have, and who can see it? And all of those are pieces that really need to be balanced through that process. And Jasmine, if you can go to the next slide. So this will lead us into the one of the pillars that we have in our digital maturity model. So we have analytic strategy, ideation.
There was a transition there. There we go. Go ahead.
Adoption, and so in these slides, and Jasmine, I don't know if you can make that big, or the presentation mode can be fun. But in these slides, if you'll see on the left, what we're showing here from an adoption standpoint is looking at these individual business units, right? We have sales, we have customer service, we have management, we have distribution, so on and so forth. And in the adoption piece, and this is really a critical step, is adoption is simply the communications and training mechanisms used to educate and improve end user adoption. And if you think about the reporting capabilities and the insights and who's making the decisions and adapting to near real-time or real-time information, it's the business. And so at this stage, we sit down with you and are talking about, just for each one of these groups, or it could be, IT or the organization as a whole. But we look to score each organization or each business unit, each leader, in where they think their individual business unit is. Because the reality is it's your journey, it's unique to you. So what we need to do and what we guide you through is let's do an assessment on where you think you are, so that we can focus our discussions and we can focus on strategies on how to get you to the next step. I mean, we all want to be the Netflix of analytics and be able to automatically just serve up and predict what you want to watch next. But the reality is that you don't go from Blockbuster to Netflix overnight. There's a process and there's information that can be collected and analyzed to really provide those predictions. And Jasmine, will you go back up one more slide? Because I want to hit on strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this is the most critical slide. So analytic strategy, there we go. So within the strategy, we start off our conversations not talking about, commonly what I hear in these workshops is we want to make data-driven decisions, and that's great. But that's an objective. What we want to understand is the strategy. So when you look at, we want to make data-driven decisions, we need to break that down and ask, okay, why do you want to make data-driven decisions? And you know, bleeding from that, then we can talk about what the next steps are. Is what do we need to do to accomplish that strategy? So you know, we want to make data-driven decisions in distribution. Let's say it's COVID right now, right? There's supply chain challenges globally. You know, so a strategy around, we want to make data-driven decisions around our supply chain and, you know, our global distribution, and in that, then we can talk about, okay, what are the components of that? Are we talking about global weather or economies or distribution channels within a country or within a state or within a city? Those all help us build a meaningful picture of not just what you're trying to accomplish, but why. And that why becomes the key finding point in there. So if you can move to the next one. So through that process, we can work with, you know, a small group or a larger group, but then we'll talk about, you know, what is the process within your organization for managing programs. I mean, ideation is about, you know, hey, I have an idea. Here's what I want to accomplish. Here's why I want to accomplish it. And where are you in that process as far as being able to take it from a department solution, or maybe it's a point solution, and really be able to maximize the investment that the enterprise makes in the pursuit of enterprise objectives. And we give one simple example of what each question might look like, but we tailor these to the organization and what their ultimate objectives are. So I'll let you read through those, but we'll move to the next slide. So we talked about adoption and the criticality of analytics adoption, and this is a piece that I really want to stress. I know it's already been talked about, so we'll move on quickly. But at the end of the day, we can come in and install you know, the world's best system that's super fast, super responsive, and is state of the art. But all it takes is a user to pull up a report, look at it, and say, this doesn't tell me what I want to know, and they dismiss it. Or they can question the you know, the accuracy of the report and dismiss it. And if they're not looking to the report, they're not trusting the report, they don't like the reports, they're simply, you know, getting them to use them can be challenging. And when we're talking about data-driven cultures, we want not just the executive management to be able to see what's going on and make decisions, but we want to empower people at the you know, at the mid-level, as well as at the cubicle level, the desk level decision makers that really know what they're doing, how it's done, and how what they do maybe impacts the next step or the previous step of the process. So adoption from the top down and bottom up, absolutely critical for success. Jasmine, if you can move to the one here.
Data management. I'll take this one. So this is the fourth category for the data management categories. And within this one, it defines the vision, goals, and supporting processes to look at the enterprise data management program. And we see this a lot across all different types of clients and industries, where it's like they need assistance to help manage, you know, their data environment, right? Data governance plays into this as well, because it's like, how do I use my data appropriately across the organization? We've got disparate data sources all over the place across different departments, you know, distribution, HR, manufacturing, marketing, finance, and, you know, how do we pull it together in an enterprise, you know, vision to be able to leverage the data that other departments can access the data, right, in such a way that everybody's on the same page, right? Master data management. What does that data governance framework, pulling together those key data classifications and governance types of policies across the board, so that everybody can do some self-service, right, based on the same data sets. And so we see this a lot, and this is definitely something that understanding what the business is trying to achieve in terms of data accessibility across the board. And so this is something that is very applicable to building that data culture and continuing to progress. The other one, which is that fifth category, is this data platform architecture and operations, and this now sets the framework for the how, in terms of like setting up the instrumentation, the data foundations, right? The information architecture. How is that going to be set up in the organization? But so in a lot of clients, we start with, well, let's start with the technology or the architecture. Well, it's actually, let's start with the business-led problems. What is it that what are the same problems we're trying to achieve here from an enterprise level perspective, and governance and data management? And then that's going to help lead into the decisions for how it's going to be architected, right? What kind of data platform, what kind of cloud solution, all the solutioning will then come afterwards to really build those capabilities. But this exercise helps to first understand what are those critical data elements that you want to be able to achieve in the organization. So this is the fifth one, and when it comes to that baselining, right, across all 5 of these categories. So, and this exercise then starts with, when it comes to the assessment, like looking at each of these data management pillars and understanding, okay, for analytics adoption, let's say, right, one of the key aspects of when Phil was alluding to, change management is a huge piece of that analytics adoption, right? Because it's like changing behaviors in the organization, enabling self-service, right? How do we enable self-service, right? We need to have that, building a common data management platform. And there's a lot of different aspects of the organization that does change. And so embracing change in that and understanding, what those priorities are in the organization to be able to support and anticipate that journey that we talked about. We talk about 3 months, 6 months from now, what those changes are, and being able to support that ahead of time.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Jasmine. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, and then basically the scoring. That's part of this, right? So the 1 through 5 for each of these categories.
Yeah, and really the key thing that we want to show here and illustrate, and I realize for everybody on the call listening to this, there's a lot of information that we're covering here in a short period of time, and really it's a time constraint. But the piece that I want to point out on this particular slide, and why it's so, there's a number of reasons why it's so important. One is on the left, again, we're illustrating different common departments within an organization. It can be any organization. And my guess is that many of you will fall into one of those categories. One thing I want to point out is you'll notice the IT isn't there. Okay, I left IT off for a very specific reason. And that reason is because as you look across these categories as we're moving, we have analytics strategy, right? We have ideation, adoption, data management, which is really talking about the governance foundations. Those are some pretty big categories. You want to know that platform and architecture, though it is super important, I'm using my pinky here to illustrate, it is a very small portion in this entire, in the entire landscape. So I just want to challenge everybody on the call looking at this slide to think about where are you in your transformation and where are your opportunity areas to maybe provide a little bit more attention. When we talk about IT, right, IT is an enablement. It's systems that enable business, not systems that control or dictate what the business does, sees, or how they consume information. So the key piece here is that the data architecture, the systems, everything that go in there, though they're significant contributions to an enterprise view, they're meant to enable business outcomes. And the outcomes are really what we need to focus on. And in your transformation, if you haven't focused on those outcomes, I really want to encourage everybody to think about what those are. But along here, this baseline allows us to establish where you are today. And in the future, it allows us to also quickly gauge where you are progressing, because this isn't a step one and ready, shoot, aim type of process. This is a program that you need to take. There's steps to achieve in this process, and it's not I'm starting at the base and I want to be best in class and we're going to do that tomorrow, because it is not that simple, as I'm sure many of you know. So once those discussions are had around where you're at, where your maturity level lies within each one of those pieces, each one of those little squares, whether you're everything's ad hoc or you're fully mature, the big discussion really comes around how can we get you to the next level? What is going to provide that business value of, in simple terms, what's going to increase your revenue, maybe increase customer value or provide strategic value and that competitive edge in your particular industry. The next section here, of course, is effort, cost, and risks. It's all complexity. So we graph those out through collaborative discussions with you, your organization, your leaders, to assess what does your roadmap look like, because you're unique, even if you're a bank and we just did a bank yesterday or that morning. Every organization, every bank, every company is unique. You guys are all snowflakes, but the challenges you face are no different. It's just at different extremes. And next slide. I think we're on to you, Ms. Jasmine.
Perfect. So this one, we wanted to share an example assessment of what we've done in the past. This particular example was for a global enterprise level manufacturing company for computer systems and assets, and we've conducted an assessment for them, and first step here was this collaborative workshop where we pulled together the lean canvas exercise. We walked through the data management capabilities and categories with them. They help define what the vision is, right? What are the customers, the value proposition, with the different aspects and departments of the business, so that we can understand where the current state is, and then talk through what are the, again, outcomes-based, business-led, what are those specific business strategy that they want to achieve, right? What is their intent? Look for the end in mind, right? So 6 months, a year from now, where do they want to be? What do they want to achieve? And so with that outcomes-based mindset, and so coming into that, right, we pulled together the initial analysis of what that looks like. And then we pulled together the model assessment, and this is an example of several. We use several tools, right? So on the left is an example of it's called a radar chart, and it helps leaders see the current state in a graphical format, right? So the lower the maturity level they're at in a specific area, the closer to the center of the radar chart they are. And so it helps see like what aspects of which departments or which areas that they are looking to explore and mature in specific areas, right? And then from the initial exercise, they score themselves. And so that's part of this assessment, and it's really insightful to see how they score themselves, where they're at today, and then after going through the analysis, where do they want to be? And then we build that roadmap on the right, there's 3 types of priorities, stratified, low, medium, high. And so they prioritize what those practice areas are, and then where they're at today versus where they want to be in terms of the maturity level for that specific area. And then we pull together that program, right? We help them say, okay, if financial management and their cloud cost visibility, that's important to them. Okay, let's start talking through what that program looks like so that we can help build those capabilities. But at the same time, there might be a few others in parallel that we can work towards a cadence to build that the mechanisms and all of the background areas for